place no one wants to set foot in, the stars above Nexus 9 gleamed with indifferent fire, casting their harsh binary glare over a world built on rot. Commander Joshua Sterling stepped off the shuttle ramp with a practiced stride, his black combat suit humming softly as its kinetic plates adjusted to the gravity shift. He scanned the jagged skyline with narrowed eyes, the taste of ozone and burning coolant thick in the air. The infamous mining colony stretched before him like a cancerous wound on the skin of space civilization. This wasn't just some dusty outpost. It was a place where morality came to die, and everything, including lives, had a price tag. Joshua despised it already. He had served across war fronts, negotiated with species no human had ever seen, and stared down starship cannons without blinking. But Nexus 9 had a reputation that made battlefields feel civilized. He wasn't here to fight, though. Earth Defense Command had sent him to negotiate mining rights, which was military speak for go clean up someone else's ethical mess. "Welcome to Nexus 9, Commander," a high-pitched voice chirped. He turned and looked down, far down, at a diminutive green-skinned alien with bulbous eyes and 3 twitching fingers. The creature's uniform bore the insignia of the mining consortium. His enthusiasm reeked of overcompensation. "I'm Crick, your liaison. The consortium is thrilled to have an Earth Defense Force representative here. We deeply value interspecies partnerships, mutual interests, and all that." The words tumbled out with oily cheer. Joshua didn't reply. His beard, trimmed but rugged, hid the beginnings of a scowl. He let the silence stretch long enough for Crick to begin squirming, then finally spoke. "Let's skip the sales pitch." The alien blinked rapidly. Yes, right. The operation. You'll want to see the mine shaft's power grid security rotations." Joshua waved a gloved hand. "Spare me the itinerary. Just take me to the damn mine so I can finish this assignment and get off this rock." Crick's smile wavered, but he regained composure with practiced corporate resilience. "Of course, Commander. But perhaps you'd indulge a brief detour first. We have something quite unique. A sight that few outsiders ever witness." Joshua arched a brow. "I'm not here for sightseeing." "Oh, but this isn't just any sight," Crick said, lowering his voice as if sharing a forbidden secret. "It's an anomaly, a living relic. We captured one of the last surviving Titans. That word, Titan, it hung in the air like an uninvited ghost." Joshua's frown deepened. "You mean those ancient giants from the Andromeda Arm? I thought they were extinct." Nearly, Crick said too quickly. "But not quite. And this one is magnificent. A true biological marvel. Would you like to see her?" Her. It wasn't the pronoun itself, but the way Crick said it, like it was both a trophy and a commodity, that made Joshua's stomach knot. Instinct screamed for him to walk away. Stick to protocol. Do the damn inspection. But curiosity had always been his worst and best trait. He exhaled. "Show me." Crick's eyes gleamed. "Right this way, Commander." As they entered the winding tunnels that led deeper into the facility, Joshua felt a chill creep into his bones. Not from the temperature, but from the undeniable sense that whatever lay ahead would change everything. He didn't know it yet, but Nexus 9 wasn't the endpoint of a mission. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The eyes of a Titan. The tunnel spiraled downward, crude stone reinforced with black alloy ribs that vibrated softly beneath Joshua's boots. The air grew cooler, thinner, laced with minerals and machine oil. Dim lights flickered overhead, struggling against the press of darkness. Crick moved ahead with awkward haste, his gait bouncy voice nervously cheerful as he mumbled about security clearances and restricted zones. Joshua ignored him. His instincts had gone razor sharp. They passed checkpoint after checkpoint, some guarded, others automated, until finally the corridor opened into a vast chamber hollowed from the planet's bedrock. Joshua's breath caught in his throat. Even his combat suit's temperature regulator briefly spiked as his body reacted with involuntary awe. She was colossal, bound between four towering support pylons humming with energy. The creature no. The woman stood unmoving. Her height exceeded 25 feet easily, towering over anything organic Joshua had encountered. Yet there was no monstrosity in her form. She was humanoid in shape, proportioned with a grace that felt both alien and regal. Her skin was deep violet, not a solid color, but a shifting spectrum amethyst, under one light obsidian, under another, alive with a faint shimmer like starlight trapped beneath the surface. She was nude, unashamedly so. Her long black hair flowed around her shoulders and down her back like an obsidian waterfall partially veiling her form. Her physique was strong yet lithe, a sculpted contrast of elegance and restraint. But it wasn't her body that made Joshua's breath stall, it was her eyes. She turned her head slowly and her gaze met his. Two orbs of pure white stared at him, not blank, not empty, but impossibly alive. Faint lavender halos swirled around the centers like galaxies in bloom. She had no pupils, no irises, yet her eyes conveyed a presence that punched through his defenses like a plasma bolt through paper. He felt seen, not scanned, not studied. Seen. Crick clapped his hands softly as if afraid to raise his voice. Behold, the last known Titan. We found her drifting in a derelict ship near the system's edge. Took weeks to subdue her. The chains are quantum bonded to her nervous system. Pain-based control. Ingenious, isn't it? Joshua said nothing. Crick misread his silence as wonder. Collectors would pay entire star systems for her. Imagine the genetic data alone, her regenerative potential, her— Shut up, Joshua said. Crick blinked. Commander. I said shut up. Joshua's tone could have frozen helium. His hands curled into fists. You think this is some lab curiosity? She's a sentient being, a prisoner. Crick hesitated. With respect, the consortium considers her high-value property. Joshua turned slowly, towering over the smaller alien. Then the consortium has no concept of decency. Crick faltered, then wisely chose retreat. I'll give you a moment alone, if you insist. I do. The moment the alien's footsteps disappeared, Joshua stepped forward. Every instinct screamed caution. She could kill him in a flick, crush his bones with a breath. But she hadn't. He approached slowly, hands open, unarmed. My name is Commander Joshua Sterling, he said, and I don't believe for a second that you're some mindless beast they caught. The Titan didn't speak at first, but her eyes never left his. Then, like the sky cracking open, she spoke. Her voice was low, rich, resonant. It was the sound of thunder wrapped in silk. You are different from the others, she said. They look with greed or fear. You look with something else. Joshua nodded. Anger. Not at me. No. His jaw tightened. At them. For this. She tilted her head slightly. I am called Andaria. Andaria. He repeated the name like a vow. How long have you been here? Long enough for hope to become a memory. She shifted the chains, hissing with energy. Why have you come, little warrior? I'm not sure anymore, he whispered. And for the first time in years, Joshua felt small, but not because of her size, because of her sorrow, and because something inside him, something long buried, had just woken up. Dialogue and awakening. Joshua stood silently staring up into her eyes, Those swirling white orbs ringed in lavender light. There was no malice in her gaze, no madness, no rage. Only patience, depth, the kind of stillness that comes not from submission, but from enduring. And Daria, the last of her kind, bound like an animal, yet somehow still dignified. He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, hands open at his sides. "I'm Commander Joshua Sterling," he said softly, the words almost swallowed by the vastness of the chamber. "And I don't believe for a moment that you're some mindless relic." Her head tilted just slightly. The energy chains cracked faintly at her movement like electric whips, restraining thunder. Her voice, when it came, was low and resonant, like a melody carved from the bones of planets. "You're not like the others. They come with fear or hunger. You come with anger." He nodded. "Because this," he motioned at the chains, "the chamber, the cruel glow of the restraints, is wrong. You're not a beast. You're not some artifact to be studied or sold. You're a sovereign being." She blinked slowly. "Once, perhaps, a long time ago." "You still are," Joshua said. "They don't get to erase that." A silence fell between them again, thick but not uncomfortable. He could hear his own breath in his helmetless suit, the soft mechanical responses of his armor compensating for the temperature drop. The lights overhead flickered, casting moving shadows along her massive form. "I am called Andaria," she said finally. Her name, a soft thunder that rolled through the room. "Andaria," he repeated, tasting it like a vow. "How long have they kept you like this?" She looked past him toward the stone ceiling far above. "Time is difficult here. The days blend, the years melt. I counted once, but it made the waiting worse." Joshua's jaw clenched. "They think they've broken you." Her eyes returned to him, piercing steady. "They've contained me. They haven't broken anything." That one sentence shook something loose in him. He'd seen prisoners before, war-torn civilians, captured operatives, tortured diplomats, but none had spoken with such quiet conviction. Not defiance, not hope, something older. "Why did they chain you instead of killing you?" he asked. A soft breath escaped her lips. "Because dead things can't be monetized. I'm more valuable like this. Exotic, rare, trapped." Joshua took another step forward. He was within reach now, close enough that if she moved suddenly, she could crush him. But she didn't. Instead, her luminous eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. "Most men who come near me keep their distance," she said. "Fear, awe, or something uglier. You come close. Why?" He hesitated. "Because you're alone. And because maybe I am too." Something shifted in her face then, not a smile, not quite, but a softening around the eyes. She slowly moved her leg a fraction toward him, the chain sparking but not resisting. An unspoken invitation. "May I?" he asked, hand hovering inches from her skin. She nodded once. His fingers met Violet's skin, warm, impossibly smooth, but beneath the surface was strength. Not muscle alone, but density, like touching living starlight. She tensed slightly at the contact but didn't withdraw. "It's been long since anyone touched me without pain," she whispered. He didn't move. "Then let this be the start of something different." She watched him. "Do you always speak like a poet, little warrior?" He chuckled softly. "Only when I meet someone who deserves poetry." Her gaze lingered. "You've walked into something far greater than a mission, Joshua Sterling." "I know," he said. "I just don't care anymore. Not if it means leaving you here." She shifted again. A faint hum echoed as her shoulder pressed back against the wall. The marks across her body shimmered faintly etched lines, some symmetrical, others jagged and broken. "These," he said, gently tracing one with his finger. "What are they?" "Life," she said. "Every titan bears them. Each line, each shape is a memory. Birth, war, love, loss. I earned every one. And this one, he asked, touching a faded swirl near her hip. She looked away for a moment. My bondmate, long gone. Joshua lowered his hand. I'm sorry. You carry loss in your voice too, she said quietly. Too many names, he replied. Too many graves. They stood there, two warriors of different worlds, bound by loss and the ache of memory. But in that silence, something else bloomed. A spark. You don't belong here, he said. No, she agreed. But neither do you. He turned to go, every instinct torn in 1,000 directions. As he reached the threshold of the chamber, she spoke once more. Joshua. He looked back. Don't wait too long. I won't, he said. Not for this. Not for you. And then he was gone, boots echoing down the stone corridor, leaving behind the woman who would no longer be forgotten. Within the mission, beyond the plan, Joshua stood in the shadows of the command deck, overlooking the Nexus 9 mining pit, arms folded behind his back. His dark eyes scanned the cavernous operations floor machines, burrowing into rock drones, transporting minerals, guards patrolling in lazy circles. Everything looked routine, compliant, efficient, but his mind was a storm. From the outside, he was a model envoy. Every move calculated, every report submitted on time. He inspected generators, cross-checked life support protocols, even reviewed staff rosters with a weariness that convinced everyone he couldn't wait to leave. That was exactly what he wanted them to think. In truth, every minute he wasn't under surveillance was spent gathering data, guard rotations, grid vulnerabilities, structural stress points. His suit, upgraded with battlefield reconnaissance software, had been quietly mapping the facility from the moment he'd arrived. Every flicker in power, every second a camera blinked, every corner where shadows lasted just a little too long. He needed to know it all, because Joshua Sterling had decided something the moment he touched her skin. He would not leave this place without Andaria. Crick continued hovering like an overeager insect, trailing him through corridors with a thin smile and thinner excuses. Commander, would you like to review the excavation rates for Sector Theta? We've had a 3.7% increase since the last solar cycle. Joshua didn't look up from the data pad in his hand. I'm more concerned about your main grid. Your backups aren't isolated. One surge could shut down containment systems. Crick's face twitched. Highly unlikely, of course. Everything's stable. He let the silence hang, then gestured to a structural support beam overhead. Reinforce that, and reroute excess energy from the sub-basement. You're playing with loaded dice and calling it safe. Crick blinked, nodded, and scurried off, no doubt, to file another useless report. Joshua didn't care. Every command he gave served a deeper purpose. The reroute would weaken the chain field by 0.6%. The support beam would buy him 6 extra seconds in a collapse scenario. He wasn't improvising, he was engineering liberation. Later that evening, he found his way back to her chamber under the guise of evaluating stress loads on subterranean load-bearing columns. The guards had grown used to his presence, exchanging bored glances as he walked past. After all, what harm could one man do? As the door sealed behind him, the familiar hum of the chains greeted him like an insult. You return often, little warrior, Andaria said, her tone laced with quiet amusement. He gave her a small grin, checking for cracks. Cracks in the structure. In their system, he replied, stepping closer. And maybe mine. Her eyes sparkled under the chamber lights. Your kind has sayings about curiosity, and cats, do they not? We also have sayings about justice and not being cowards. She studied him a moment. You move like a soldier, but you speak like a man carrying something heavier than orders. He stopped beneath her, placing one hand on a support column. and the other against her leg, their now familiar ritual. "I'm not just here on Earth's orders anymore," he said. And Daria tilted her head, voice soft. "Then why are you here?" He looked up at her eyes, fierce. "Because I've seen something worth saving, and I don't leave people behind." She didn't smile. She didn't blink. But something in her shimmered like starlight cracking through stone. And in that moment, the mission was no longer about minerals. It was about redemption. A titan's heart and a human's fire. The chamber was quiet, except for the low hum of the energy chains and the occasional thrum of distant machinery like the heartbeat of a slumbering beast. Joshua stood close to her now, well within reach of those colossal hands, within breath of danger if she chose it. But she didn't. Not once. And that said more than words ever could. "You're not afraid of me," Andaria said, not as a question, but as a quiet statement of wonder. "No," he replied. "I've seen monsters. You're not one of them." Her expression shifted just slightly, but enough. The smallest softening of her gaze. The beginning of trust, carved into an ancient soul, long denied it. "You speak like someone who's lost faith in many things," she murmured, "and yet you still speak with fire." Joshua gave a small wry smile. "Maybe fire is all I have left." Andaria leaned forward slowly, carefully. Even her smallest movement carried the suggestion of tectonic power, restrained by will alone. Her face now close enough for him to see the faint lines of bioluminescence across her cheeks was unreadable. "My people," she said slowly, believed that fire was sacred, not just heat or destruction, but creation, rebirth. The stars themselves were our first god. "Then maybe you'll believe me when I say your fire isn't gone," Joshua said. "Just buried, waiting." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken shimmered between them, raw, undeniable. A tension forged not of danger, but recognition. She shifted again, the chains whining faintly. "You come often. Why?" He hesitated, then said the truth plainly. "Because I think about you more than I should, even when I try not to." Andaria was silent. Her gaze dropped for the first time since they'd met. Then she looked to the markings etched along her thigh, those beautiful alien patterns glowing dimly. "Do you know what this one means?" she asked, brushing a finger, barely moving it toward a spiral carved near her hip. Joshua stepped forward and gently placed his hand beside it, not touching the mark, just feeling its heat. "Tell me." "It represents a promise," she said, "one never fulfilled. One I believed I'd carry into death." His voice lowered. "Maybe it wasn't meant to be fulfilled. Until now." A long breath escaped her lips, deep and measured like the sigh of a mountain that had waited an eternity to exhale. "You humans," she whispered. "So small, so fragile, and yet you speak like giants." He chuckled softly. "We make up for our size with very loud emotions." She smiled then. A true smile. A quiet curve of lips that illuminated her entire face. "Indeed. You feel so loudly, little warrior." He stepped even closer now, placing his hand again on her skin, this time more deliberately. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the contact, eyes closing briefly. "How long has it been," she said, "since someone touched me with anything but restraint or fear?" Joshua didn't answer with words. He simply let his hand remain warm and steady over the mark of her unfulfilled promise. "I never imagined," she said quietly, "that salvation would come in the form of a man who barely reaches my knee." He smiled, but his tone was fierce. "Then they clearly didn't teach you enough about humans." Andaria looked down at him, those radiant eyes flickering with something that wasn't quite laughter, but wasn't sadness either. "Perhaps not." He hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Tomorrow night," he whispered, "the backup generators undergo maintenance. You'll have 3 minutes without containment. 3 minutes of freedom." Her entire body stilled like a planet poised on the edge of orbit. 3 minutes, she repeated. That's all I need, Joshua said, to break your chains. She reached down slowly with one massive finger and touched his chest, just above his heart. Then I will be ready, little warrior. And in that touch, more gentle than he'd imagined something so strong could be, he felt it, not just alliance, not just trust, but the fragile, dangerous beginning of something much greater, something neither of them could name. Not yet. The betrayal. Joshua's boots echoed sharply against the stone as he made his way toward the containment chamber. It was late deliberately so. The halls were quiet, the usual foot traffic thinned to skeleton crews. Tonight was the window. He'd timed everything. Power reroutes, surveillance loops, guard patterns, a dozen subtle manipulations threaded into one moment of opportunity. But something was wrong. The moment he passed through the final checkpoint, a chill slithered down his spine. The usual guards were gone, replaced. The two men flanking the doorway wore heavier armor, black consortium grade, not the lax security outfits typical of Nexus 9. Their helmets bore scanning arrays, and Joshua felt his suit register a directed pulse. They were actively scanning him. His pace slowed. Then he heard it. A voice too smooth to be anything but dangerous. Commander Sterling said, a figure emerging from the shadows. Punctual as expected. Director Venn. The consortium's head of security stepped into the light. His scaled face bore the familiar predatory calm that Joshua had always distrusted. Behind him stood two more soldiers, their weapons slung loose, but not passive. I wasn't aware I was being summoned, Joshua said evenly. Oh, you weren't. This is merely a timely coincidence. Venn offered a smile without mirth. You've shown quite the interest in our Titan, and while we encourage curiosity, we begin to grow suspicious of intent. Joshua kept his expression neutral, but inside adrenaline surged. He counted exits, assessed their stances, calculated their fields of fire. I'm following inspection protocol, he replied coolly. Structural integrity reports require me to scan our internal systems, reroute energy flow from security grids, adjust containment parameters. Venn's voice sharpened. Your suit's activity logs are quite telling. Behind Joshua, the chamber door slid open. The chains hummed. Andaria was already watching him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes blazed not with fear, but with fierce concern. They know, she said softly, her voice echoing in his earpiece. I figured that out, Joshua muttered under his breath. Venn stepped beside him, hands clasped behind his back like a man admiring a painting. You've made a fatal miscalculation, Commander. You believed we wouldn't notice. You believed you could walk into our house, touch our prize, and leave without consequence. Joshua turned to face him, voice like steel. She's not a prize. She's not your property. Venn chuckled. How quaint. Morality. So inefficient out here on the frontier. You're not going to kill me, Joshua said. Not yet. I'm still Earth Defense Force. Officially, yes. Venn raised an eyebrow. Which is why your tragic death during a routine inspection will be such a pity. So sudden. So unfortunate. The soldiers raised their weapons. Behind him, the chains crackled. Andaria tensed, a growl rumbling from deep in her chest. I'm sorry, little warrior, she whispered. Don't be, Joshua replied, barely audible. Then louder. Louder than the tension in the air, louder than the threat around him, he said, Venn. The director paused. Yes, Joshua smiled. Just a little. I lied about the maintenance schedule. The lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the chamber. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then chaos. Joshua's suit flared to life, switching to thermal vision. The guards' targeting systems faltered in the blackout. He moved before they could adapt, one flashbang, then another, disorienting them as his armor kicked into full combat mode. Behind him, the chain snapped. Andaria roared, not in rage but in release, as she tore one of the containment pylons from its moorings. The sound was like a mountain breaking free. Then shouted, "Contain her, fire, fire." But it was too late. She was no longer bound, and she was angry. Joshua ducked as a beam of twisted metal flew past his head, knocking a guard clean off the platform. "Andaria," he yelled. "The ceiling. It's unstable." "I see it," she called, voice booming with power. Their escape had begun, but the price of freedom was about to be paid in fire steel and blood. The Titan awakens. The chamber convulsed with chaos. Metal screamed as Andaria ripped free from the last chain, her violet form erupting into motion with terrifying grace. Her foot crashed down onto the catwalk, crumpling steel like paper. Debris rained from the fractured ceiling, the guards still reeling from the blackout, and Joshua's flashbangs scattered like insects before a storm. Joshua's combat suit buzzed with proximity alerts. One guard to his left neutralized with a sweep of the leg. Another took aim from above. He pivoted, fired a concussive pulse, sent the attacker hurling backward into darkness. "Andaria," he barked through the chaos. "Can you break through the north corridor?" She turned, eyes blazing with wild focus. Yes, but not alone. Without hesitation, she reached down, one colossal hand scooping him up, cradling him against her chest with startling gentleness. The sensation was jarring, visceral. The thrum of her heartbeat like thunder beneath his ears, the heat of her skin radiating through his armor. She held him, not like cargo, not like weight, but like something precious. "Hold tight, little warrior," she said, and then she ran. Steel shattered beneath her bare feet. Walls buckled as she drove through the structure like a living missile. Sirens wailed overhead. Emergency lights flickered in red and white strobes as they tore through the corridors of Nexus 9. Behind them, a voice crackled over the facility intercom, then barely containing his panic. "Seal all exits. Deploy the heavy artillery. Do not let her leave. Kill the human if you must." They burst through a reinforced blast door, Andaria's shoulder pulverizing it on impact. Joshua glanced at his tactical display, pinged signals incoming from multiple angles. "Pursuit squads closing from sectors Theta and Zeta," he shouted. "They're coordinating air support." "Let them come," Andaria growled. "Let them remember why Titans were feared." The mining tunnels gave way to the central processing causeway, a massive cylindrical corridor stretching toward the planetary surface. Conveyor systems hissed and screamed as they activated emergency lockdown protocols. "Obstacle ahead," Joshua warned. Andaria didn't stop. She vaulted over a pipeline thicker than a starship hull, landing in a crouch that cracked the floor beneath her. Sparks erupted from the ceiling as she braced against the impact, shielding Joshua instinctively with her body. He'd never felt so small or so safe. "3 more levels to the surface," he said. "I've mapped an emergency lift in the south shaft. No time." She skidded to a halt in front of what appeared to be a solid wall. Joshua's suit blinked. "Wait, that's not a wall. It's a sealed lava tube reinforced with debris netting." Andaria placed him gently on the floor. "How deep?" 50 meters vertical. It exits just below the surface ridge. "If we climb fast enough." He didn't finish. She punched through the wall. Rock exploded outward. Dust and ash filled the air as she tore open a passage that hadn't seen light in decades. Without pause, she reached down, lifted him once again, and began the ascent, her fingers finding impossible holds in the raw volcanic stone. Hand over hand, step by step. The tunnel was narrow, but her form moved like liquid strength, pressing through stone-defying mass and gravity. Around them, the facility shook. Joshua's sensors registered power grid failures, oxygen drops, subsystem collapses. They had triggered a chain reaction. The entire base was dying behind them. Ships, Joshua said through clenched teeth. They've scrambled pursuit ships. They'll be above us in 90 seconds. Andaria didn't stop climbing. Let them come. I will not be caged again. She broke through the final layer of stone with a roar emerging into open sky. Twin moons hung above the horizon, bathing the jagged rocks in pale light. Sirens blared distantly behind them. Smoke curled up from the ruined facility below. They had made it. They were free. But it was far from over. Joshua adjusted his position in her palm, scanning the horizon. We're exposed here. My suit can mask our heat signature temporarily, but we need cover. And soon. Andaria knelt, placing him gently on a flat boulder. Her massive form loomed behind him like a living monument to rebellion. I know a place, she said. I felt it when they brought me here. Mountains of crystal to the north. Deep caves. Joshua turned to her, breath-catching. Her face was streaked with ash and starlight eyes, wide lips parted in something like awe. She wasn't smiling, not yet, but she looked alive, more alive than he had ever seen her. He reached up and touched her cheek, armor brushing skin. You did it, he said. We did, she corrected. Then, with the faintest upward curve of her lips, she added, and now we run. And so they did. Together. Caverns and buried longing. The crystalline mountains rose like fractured dreams from the scorched plains, jagged and luminous under the twin moons. Their surfaces shimmered with an iridescent glow, refracting starlight through veins of quartz, an ancient volcanic glass. Nestled within their roots, hidden by a natural ridge and shielded by centuries of collapse, was a cave wide enough for Andaria to enter, crouching deep enough to swallow the echoes of the world. Joshua had never seen a place so quiet. No blinking lights, no machinery, no commands. Just breath, rock, and her. Andaria settled her massive frame against the stone wall, the cave bending to her presence like a cathedral to its deity. Her breathing was steady now, no longer the urgent panting of battle. She held herself tall, dignified, yet still. The silence wrapped around them not like absence, but like a blanket. Joshua knelt a few meters away, checking his suit diagnostics. Minor damage, strain across the leg servos, nothing he couldn't fix. But his fingers hesitated, because she was watching him, not looming, not guarding, just watching with a softness in her eyes that was new, dangerous even. He looked up and met her gaze. You're staring, he said. You fascinate me, she replied, voice low and velvety in the cave's acoustics. So small, so fragile, yet you move like you belong beside monsters. You're not a monster, he said without hesitation. She smiled just a little. Not to you. But I have been to others. He rose and stepped closer, boots crunching lightly on mineral dust. Then those others were fools. Her breath caught. Not in pain, but something deeper, more vulnerable. You keep saying things I've never heard from anyone with a weapon. That's because I don't see you as a target, he said. I see you. Andaria looked down, her glowing eyes unreadable. She extended one hand slowly, palm upward, inviting. A gesture that no longer carried any sense of caution, only meaning. Joshua didn't hesitate. He stepped into her hand. The difference in scale was staggering, his entire body fitting easily in the center of her palm, like a whisper resting on a thundercloud. She lifted him with care, drawing him to eye level. I've been wondering something, she said, her voice softer now. Among my people, size was never a barrier to connection. We valued essence, spirit, the fire within. But among yours, is such a thing possible? Joshua's heart pounded. He reached up and placed his hand against the side of her face, where her skin shimmered with faint lavender light. I don't care what others think is possible. I only care about what we feel right now. Her breath deepened, her hand tightening protectively around him. Then tell me, little warrior, what do you feel? That for the first time in years he whispered, I don't feel alone. Andaria's lips parted, and before he could say another word, she lifted him slightly higher and pressed him gently to her face. Her lips, massive, warm, impossibly soft, brushed against his torso in a kiss unlike anything he had imagined. Not desire alone, not instinct. It was reverence, affection, a silent confession carved in touch. Joshua exhaled slowly, overwhelmed. When she pulled back, her voice was barely audible. It has been so long since anyone touched me without fear. He reached for her again, stroking her cheek. Then let's forget fear, just for tonight. She lowered him slowly onto her chest, just above the steady thrum of her heart. He settled there, resting against the smooth curve of her skin, feeling her warmth seep into his bones. Time passed without measure. They spoke quietly about Earth, about Titan, memories about myths both real and half-forgotten. She told him stories of stars older than human calendars. He told her about ocean's music and the feeling of sun on bare skin. And somewhere in that space between breath and word, their bodies found a language of their own. Gentle, careful, exploratory. They moved with curiosity, not conquest. Her strength was guided by restraint, his courage tempered by awe. There was no rush, only discovery of textures, of sounds, of places where difference melted and only connection remained. Later, wrapped in the curve of her arm, Joshua stared at the crystalline ceiling above them. Her fingers traced slow circles across his back. I never expected this, she said. Not here, not now, not ever. Neither did I, he murmured. She looked down at him, her eyes soft. But you make the impossible feel inevitable. He smiled. Then we're just getting started. And far beyond the cave under the eyes of the moons, the world turned quietly unaware that in its forgotten mountains something powerful had been reborn. Not rage, not war, but love. The journey to freedom. Dawn crept into the mountains like a whisper, soft golden light, painting the jagged ridges in shades of fire and amethyst. Joshua stood at the cave entrance, one hand shielding his eyes against the glare. His suit's visor was cracked along the edge, a reminder of the chaos they'd fled just hours earlier. Behind him, the cave still held the warmth of her presence. Andaria. She emerged slowly, stretching beneath the open sky, as though reclaiming it. Her movements were graceful now, less tense than before. The bruises from containment had already faded, her regenerative biology working faster than any human could comprehend. But Joshua noticed something else, something subtle. She walked with one hand resting gently against her lower abdomen. You feel different, he said. I am, she replied simply. He nodded. They didn't speak of it yet, not directly, but the truth loomed between them like the sunrise itself. Something had changed inside her. A new life had begun to stir. And that changed everything. We need to move, Joshua said. They're scanning the range. My suit sensors picked up aerial sweeps last night. Low-altitude patrols, mostly from the east. Consortium ships, she asked. Yes, 3 of them. They'll have surface troops deployed by midday. We need to be gone by then. And Daria's eyes turned north. There's a canyon route, she said. I sensed it while we climbed, less exposed, steep but walkable. Where does it lead? Joshua activated a holographic projection from his gauntlet. A blue grid spread over the landscape, blinking with coordinates. The Crimson Wastes, he said. 40 kilometers across. Beyond that, an independent spaceport. Illicit, barely regulated, but they won't ask questions if we pay enough. And do you have enough? He looked up at her, one eyebrow raised. I've been paid in wars, not credits. But consortium schematics are worth a fortune in the right hands. Andaria smiled faintly. Then we trade stolen knowledge for stolen freedom. Exactly. They set out quickly, keeping low along the ridgelines. Joshua ran beside her when terrain allowed and rode within her cupped hands when it didn't. The canyon walls pressed inward as they descended, sunlight growing fragmented, filtered through twisted rock spires and sharp drops. Echoes of their movements bounced off every surface, reminders of how exposed they still were. I thought it would feel lighter, she said after a long silence. What would? Freedom. He glanced up at her. It rarely does. At first it just feels like everything's chasing you. She didn't answer immediately. Then, and yet you chase nothing. Only me. Not true, he said. I'm chasing what we can be. For a time they walked without speaking. The landscape shifted, soil became rust-red sand, the air drier, spiced with iron and salt. Joshua felt heat building beneath his suit while Andaria's steps grew slower, more deliberate. Not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. She paused at a plateau, one hand braced against the cliff wall, the other curling protectively over her belly. Joshua rushed to her side. Andaria, what is it? Her face was calm, but her eyes were wide. Not pain, she said, just change. He grows fast. Joshua blinked. She smiled softly. I feel him. Strong, restless. He kicked when you spoke. His breath caught. The weight of it hit him all over again, not just the fight for freedom, not just escape, but legacy. A child. The impossible proof that something extraordinary had begun between them. Then we keep him safe, he said, stepping forward. Both of you. Andaria knelt slightly, lowering herself so that they were eye to eye. You already do, little warrior. Behind them, the winds shifted, bringing with them the faint hum of engines. Joshua's visor lit up. They found us. Andaria stood tall again, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Then let them try. She reached down, lifted him in one smooth motion, and took off running her stride, long, relentless, a living titan carving through crimson sand. And as the sun rose higher, casting shadows that stretched across the wasteland, the hunted became the hunters, and nothing would stop them. Not now. The battle at the edge. The Crimson Wastes lived up to their name, an ocean of red sand that shimmered with psychoactive minerals under the twin suns. Each step Andaria took left a crater in the dune, her stride relentless, powerful. Joshua rode cradled in one arm, his visor scanning ahead, searching for the distant silhouette of the spaceport. It finally appeared like a mirage solidifying into steel. Jagged landing pads, rust-stained hangars, and towers of scrap metal welded into functional structures. The port sprawled across the horizon like a mechanical scavenger built by smugglers, mercenaries, and exiles. But something was wrong. Joshua's visor blinked red. Wait, there's too much activity. That's consortium armor. Andaria growled low in her throat. They got here first. From the ridge above the port, they crouched and observed. Dozens of armed vehicles surrounded the outer perimeter. Patrols circled every hangar, and at the center of it all, standing tall like the executioner at a gallows, was Director Venn, his scaly skin gleaming under solar glare, his weaponized exosuit powered and waiting. He's betting we'd come here, Joshua muttered. Andaria's voice was calm. Then let him lose. Joshua tapped his gauntlet, pulling up a schematic of the port. Hangar 7. That's where the St. Elmo's Fire is docked. Cargo hauler built to move space whales. Big enough for you. Tough enough to fly through hell. Then we get there, she said. Joshua looked up at her. It's crawling with firepower calibrated for your size. Armor-piercing rounds, null nets, ion bursts. They don't want to kill you. They want to cage you again. And Daria's eyes narrowed. Then they've already lost, because I'm done hiding. Before he could stop her, she rose to her full height and stepped into view. Chaos erupted. Sirens blared, troops shouted, spotlights locked onto her figure. Andaria raised her voice, not a roar, but a proclamation. I am Andaria of the Titans. You called me a monster. You bound me in chains. You tried to own me. But today I take back what was stolen. Troopers opened fire. The first wave hit her like hail against a mountain. Joshua ducked behind a cargo container as rounds sizzled past. Andaria charged not recklessly, but with terrifying precision. She grabbed a supply hauler, swung it like a club, and swept a cluster of soldiers off their feet. Metal shrieked. Explosions bloomed. Vin activated his exosuit and stepped forward, voice booming over a personal loudspeaker. Stand down, specimen. This is your final warning. Joshua emerged from cover, sprinting toward the control tower. Now it's my turn. His suit slipped into stealth mode, cloaking his heat signature. He ducked under drones, scaled the side of the structure, and slammed into the override terminal with a gauntleted fist. Fingers danced across the console. The system resisted, but not for long. Hangar 7 doors groaned, then opened. The St. Elmo's Fire sat inside a massive whale-shaped vessel designed to house giants. Its fusion engines hummed to life as Joshua triggered emergency launch protocols. Back outside, Andaria moved like an avalanche. Nothing slowed her, not the null nets, not the tranquilizers, not even the plasma turrets. Her only pause came when a cluster of troops aimed a net cannon toward the hangar. Joshua's voice roared through her earpiece. Get inside. It's now or never. She turned limbs, moving with brutal efficiency, and sprinted toward the hangar, shoving aside armored trucks like toys. A rocket struck her shoulder, but she barely flinched. Blood shimmered violet on her skin, but her eyes burned brighter. As she reached the entrance, Vin stepped into her path. I'll end you myself, he hissed, raising a pulse cannon. Joshua emerged behind him. Too late, he said, and fired. The round hit Vin's shoulder, spinning him. Andaria didn't hesitate. Her fist came down like a comet. Vin's exosuit crumpled, sparks bursting skyward as the director collapsed in a heap. Joshua rushed forward. You okay? Andaria knelt, scooping him into her arms. We fly, now. They entered the hangar, the door sealed behind them. The St. Elmo's Fire roared to life. As the engines lifted them from the surface, missiles streaked through the sky, but none hit. The ship's hull, reinforced by alien alloys, absorbed the blast with thunderous indifference. They broke the upper atmosphere in less than a minute. Silence fell. Stars unfolded before them. Joshua turned to her, his voice quiet now. We're clear. Andaria didn't answer right away. She looked down at her bloodied hands, then at him. Then she whispered, we're free. And together they drifted into the black, no longer fugitives, but legends in motion, hearts among stars. Space stretched around them like a cathedral, carved in shadow and starlight. The engines of the St. Elmo's Fire hummed low, no longer in flight from war, but in motion toward a future unwritten. The ship, once a hauler of dead mass, now carried something far more dangerous, love, defiance, and the beginning of something unpermitted. Andaria stood near the observation canopy, her silhouette outlined by stars. The soft rise of her belly moved with each breath, steady, powerful, alive. In silence, she watched the void, not as a prisoner escaping a cell, but as a queen surveying her kingdom. Joshua approached, removing his helmet. The artificial gravity tugged gently at his limbs, but the weight in his chest came from something else. "How's your pulse?" he asked softly. She answered without turning. "Slower, stronger, no more sedation, no more machines trying to tell me what I am." He moved beside her, leaning against the frame. "Then let me ask, what are you now?" She glanced sideways, her smile sad but radiant. "Free, terrified, carrying a child I didn't plan, carrying a future I don't know how to protect." Joshua nodded slowly. "We'll protect it together." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was warm, electric, with everything they didn't need to say. Stars blinked like old truths outside the glass. "I used to believe pain was the only inheritance my kind would pass down," she said, voice low. "Chains, resistance, rebellion. That survival was the closest we'd get to victory. And now," she turned fully to him, "now I believe in something I never allowed myself before." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "Hope." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Love." That word. It landed like a meteor between them, soft but undeniable. Joshua didn't flinch. He stepped closer, placing his hand gently over her stomach. The heat of her skin bled through layers of armor, and he felt it. That subtle, impossible movement. "You know," he said, "I think she kicked." And Daria blinked. "She?" Joshua smiled. "Feels like a she, fierce already." The Titan looked down at her abdomen, one massive hand resting over his. "A daughter born between worlds, neither theirs nor ours. What do we even teach her?" He took a deep breath. "We teach her truth. Not the kind stamped on government seals or hidden in scrolls, but the kind written in scars, in choices. We teach her what it means to fight, yes, but also what it means to stop." She closed her eyes, nodding. "We teach her to choose." They moved to the rest chamber, repurposed from a cargo cell, and Daria settled onto a reinforced alcove curling around him like a fortress made of skin and breath. Joshua leaned into her side, protected by the only thing he trusted in the universe anymore. "You saved me," she said suddenly. He blinked. "I'm pretty sure it was the other way around." "No," she insisted. "You didn't just break the chains. You saw me before they were broken, before I believed I was more than a weapon." He laid his head against her shoulder. "That's because you saw me too." And Daria's eyes glistened. "Promise me something." Joshua nodded. "If the galaxy comes again, if they hunt her the way they hunted me, don't let her grow bitter. Don't let her become what I nearly did." "I swear," he whispered, "she will never forget where she came from, or who bled so she could be born free." Andaria pressed her forehead against his. Not a kiss, not quite. Something older, something sacred. "I think I love you," she said. "I know," he replied. No fireworks followed. No orchestral swell, just breathing, just presence. Just two broken creatures holding each other in defiance of a galaxy that said they couldn't. Among the stars, they were no longer fugitives. They were family. The new world. The spaceport shimmered in the desert night like a secret whispered by the stars. It had no name, just coordinates passed among smugglers, defectors, and those who refused to kneel. Joshua guided the ship toward the landing cradle hands, steady on the controls, and Daria stood behind him, her breath calm, her stance tall. "We're not running anymore," he said. "No," she agreed. "We're arriving." The St. Elmo's fire touched down with a hiss of vapor and soft groan of landing struts. Outside, beyond the cracked glass of the viewing bay, the world waited, not the one they had fled, but one waiting to be rewritten. Joshua opened the hatch. Heat rolled in. So did silence. Then a figure emerged. Human old, wrapped in tattered robes and holding a data pad like a scepter. "No flags here," he said. "No allegiances either. You pay, you stay. You breathe, you matter." Joshua stepped forward, unarmed, unshielded. "We're looking for a place. Aren't we all?" He glanced back at Andaria. She walked behind him, towering, radiant, and very visibly pregnant. The elder didn't flinch. He just smiled wider. "Well now," he said, tapping the pad, "that changes things." He led them through the outpost, a maze of sun-baked steel and buried tech. No government eyes, no broadcast towers, just life, rough and real. Children ran between buildings. Traders haggled over alien herbs and spare parts. Refugees worked side by side with ex-soldiers. There was no anthem, just survival. Andaria observed it all with a quiet awe. "This isn't what I expected." "It never is," Joshua replied. "The new world isn't built by kings. It's built by people who refuse to die the old way." They arrived at a dome, a bio-dwelling half submerged in sand and shielded by solar trees. The elder gestured. "Yours. Paid through the next 2 lunar cycles. After that, you trade or move." Joshua turned to Andaria. "Will this do?" She nodded slowly. "It's not a palace." "No," he said. "But it's not a prison either." They stepped inside. The air was warm and dry. Panels flickered to life. Water pulsed through buried pipes. A single bed, a food replicator, and a star map console lined one wall. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Andaria touched the ceiling gently. "Do you think she'll remember this place?" Joshua sat on the edge of the bed. "She'll remember the warmth, the way you breathed easier, the way no one bowed to anyone." Night fell heavy. Outside, the twin moons rose, and inside, beneath layers of armor and silence, 2 hearts beat side by side. Andaria slept curled on one side of the room, her arm across her belly. Joshua stayed up staring at the star map. Red sectors blinked where the consortium still held power. Blue ones marked rebel uprisings. But he wasn't planning battles anymore. He was charting futures. In the center of the map, he placed a marker. Home. Not Earth. Not Titanica. Just a point in space where history bent, where love had refused extinction. A soft sound stirred him. Andaria rose slowly from her bed, one hand clutching her belly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "It's time," she said. Joshua stood. "Now?" She nodded. "She's ready." They didn't panic. They didn't run. The galaxy had thrown its worst at them, and they were still standing, still breathing, still building something stronger than control. He helped her lie back on the bed, guiding her hand to his. "I'm here," he whispered. "I know." As the stars wheeled above their dome, the new world began, not in fire, not in war, but in breath and light and trembling fingers. A child was born, a bridge between species, a revolution in a heartbeat. And from that moment, the galaxy would never be the same.